Welcome, dear viewers, to another captivating tale from the age of the Vikings. Before we embark on this emotional journey together, please take a moment to hit that like button if you enjoy Norse stories, subscribe to our channel for more mythological tales, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with our global Viking family. Now, let's dive into our story. The bitter winds of the northern fjords carried more than salt and snow that fateful morning. They carried the cries of abandonment that would echo through two lives forever. Tormund Grimson stood at the edge of his weathered longhouse, his greying beard catching ice crystals as he gazed across the frozen landscape that had been his home for more seasons than he cared to count. At 53 winters, Tormund had seen enough battles to fill 3 lifetimes. His shield arm bore scars from Saxon blades. His left leg carried a permanent limp from a spear thrust in the Irish raids, and his heart carried wounds deeper than any weapon could inflict. The great warrior who once sailed with crews of 30 now lived alone. His wife claimed by fever 5 winters past, his only son lost to the hungry waves during a storm off the Orkney Islands. The settlement around him buzzed with the familiar rhythms of morning life. Women tended smoky fires, their voices carrying across the crisp air as they called to children playing in the snow. Men sharpened weapons and mended nets, their laughter punctuating conversations about upcoming voyages and trading expeditions. Yet Tormund remained apart from it all, an island of solitude in a sea of community. Another day dawns, and I greet it alone, he muttered to himself, a daily ritual that had become as natural as breathing. His words formed small clouds in the frigid air before dissipating into nothingness, much like his hope had done over the passing years. But this morning would be different. This morning, the gods had plans. As Tormund turned to retreat into the warmth of his dwelling, a sound caught his attention, faint, almost lost in the wind, but unmistakably human. He paused, tilting his head like an old wolf catching an unfamiliar scent. There it was again, a weak cry carried on the morning breeze from the direction of the sacred grove beyond the village. His instincts, honed by decades of survival, urged him to investigate. Tormund had learned long ago that in these harsh lands, ignoring the unusual often meant ignoring danger or opportunity. He wrapped his thick fur cloak tighter around his broad shoulders and set out across the snow-covered ground, his breath forming rhythmic puffs as he walked. The sacred grove stood ancient and imposing, its towering pine trees reaching toward the grey sky like the fingers of sleeping giants. These woods had witnessed countless rituals, offerings to the gods, and ceremonies marking the passages of life. Local folklore claimed that Odin himself had walked among these trees, seeking wisdom from their whispered secrets. Children were warned never to enter alone, lest they disturb forces beyond their understanding. Yet today, something had been left at the grove's entrance, something that would change everything. Tormund's weathered eyes widened as he approached a small bundle wrapped in coarse woolen cloth, partially buried in fresh snowfall. The cries were definitely coming from within. With careful hands that had once wielded battle axes and now trembled slightly with age, he brushed away the snow and lifted the bundle. Inside lay an infant, no more than a few months old, with pale skin tinged blue from cold and lungs that worked desperately to voice his distress. The child was thin, clearly having gone without proper nourishment, but his eyes, bright blue like summer skies, held a fierce determination to survive. "By the gods," Tormund whispered, his voice cracking with emotion he hadn't felt in years. "What manner of person abandons a child to the mercy of wolves and winter?" As he cradled the infant against his chest, sharing his body's warmth, Tormund noticed something extraordinary. There, on the baby's pale chest, was a distinctive mark, dark as a raven's wing, and shaped precisely like the sacred bird of Odin. The mark wasn't a tattoo or paint. It appeared to be a natural birthmark, but its perfect formation seemed far too deliberate for mere chance. The old Viking's heart pounded with recognition and reverence. In their culture, ravens held sacred significance. They were Odin's messengers, his eyes and ears in the mortal realm. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, flew across all the 9 realms each day, bringing news to the All-Father. To bear the mark of the raven was to bear the mark of divine attention. "You're no ordinary foundling, are you, little one?" Tormund murmured, studying the child's face. "The gods themselves have marked you." The baby's cries softened as warmth began to return to his tiny body. His small fingers, no bigger than twigs, grasped weakly at Tormund's beard, and in that simple gesture, the old warrior felt something awaken in his heart that he thought had died with his wife and son. As he stood in the sacred grove, holding this mysterious child, Tormund felt a presence he couldn't quite explain. The wind seemed to still, the trees appeared to lean closer, and for a moment he could have sworn he heard the distant sound of ravens calling, though none were visible in the grey sky above. "Perhaps," he said to the infant, his voice stronger now, filled with newfound purpose, "perhaps you are indeed a gift from the All-Father. Perhaps Odin saw fit to bring meaning back to an old warrior's empty days." The journey back to his longhouse felt shorter than the trip out, though Tormund moved carefully to avoid jostling his precious cargo. Neighbors watched curiously as the reclusive warrior passed by, many noting the bundle in his arms with raised eyebrows and whispered conversations. Tormund paid them no attention. His focus remained entirely on the child, who had appeared like an answer to prayers he hadn't even realized he'd been offering. Inside his dwelling, the warmth from the central fire pit embraced them both. Tormund had maintained the flames more from habit than necessity during his solitary years, but now he saw how the gods' wisdom worked in mysterious ways. The fire was ready to warm a child who desperately needed it. He laid the baby gently on furs near the hearth and began the careful process of ensuring the child's survival. From his stores, he found goat's milk, which he warmed carefully and fed to the hungry infant drop by drop. The baby accepted the nourishment eagerly, his color improving with each passing hour. As night fell and the infant slept peacefully in a makeshift cradle crafted from Tormund's old shield, the Viking sat beside the fire and contemplated the day's extraordinary events. He studied the raven mark on the child's chest, tracing its intricate outline with wonder. What name should an old warrior give to a gift from the gods? He pondered aloud, his voice echoing softly in the quiet space. After much consideration, watching the way firelight danced across the baby's peaceful features, he decided. "Thorvald," he said firmly. "Thorvald Torunson, for you shall be my son now, and Thor's rule shall guide your path." Dim, but as Tormund settled into his sleeping furs that first night, he could not have known the true nature of the mark that graced his adopted child. In the darkness beyond the firelight, shadows seemed to dance with unusual purpose, and somewhere in the realm between dreams and waking, the sound of distant laughter, neither wholly benevolent nor entirely malicious, echoed through dimensions unseen. The raven mark pulsed almost imperceptibly in the dying firelight, and the child stirred in his sleep, small lips curving into what might have been a smile. 15 summers had passed since that fateful morning in the sacred grove, and the foundling had grown into a young man of exceptional promise. Thorvald Torunson stood tall and strong at 18 winters, his shoulders broad from years of training with axe and sword, his hands skilled at both crafting and combat. The villagers often remarked on his unusual intelligence and charisma, qualities that drew people to him like moths to flame. Tormund watched with pride as his adopted son demonstrated his prowess with a battle-axe before a gathered crowd of younger warriors. Thorvald's movements were fluid and precise, each swing calculated to maximum effect. His pale hair, the color of winter wheat, caught the afternoon sunlight, and his bright blue eyes sparkled with the joy of competition. "Your form improves daily," called out Gunnar the smith, whose own sons struggled to match Thorvald's natural ability. "The gods have blessed you with warrior's instincts." Thorvald smiled, lowering his weapon and wiping sweat from his brow. "My father trained me well," he replied, nodding respectfully toward Tormund. "An old wolf still has much to teach eager pups." The crowd laughed appreciatively, but Tormund noticed something in his son's expression, a fleeting shadow that passed across his features like a cloud blocking the sun. These moments had become more frequent as Thorvald entered adulthood. Though the young man always recovered quickly, his charm and wit returning as if nothing had occurred. That evening, as father and son sat beside their familiar hearth, sharing a meal of roasted fish and bread, Tormund decided to address what had been weighing on his mind for months. "You've grown restless, my son," he observed, setting down his wooden bowl. "I see it in your eyes during training, hear it in your voice when we speak of the future. What troubles your heart?" Thorvald was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dancing flames. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an undertone that Tormund had never heard before, something darker, more complex than simple youth's impatience. "Father, do you ever wonder why you found me that day? Why, of all the warriors in our settlement, you were the one drawn to the sacred grove?" "The gods work in mysterious ways," Tormund replied carefully. "Perhaps Odin saw that we both needed each other. You, a child requiring protection, and I, an old warrior needing purpose." "But what if it wasn't protection I needed?" Thorvald's blue eyes met his father's, and for just a moment Tormund saw something in their depths that made his breath catch. What if the gods had different plans? The raven mark on Thorvald's chest, usually hidden beneath his tunic, seemed to pulse with warmth as he spoke. Over the years, the mark had grown more pronounced rather than fading, its edges becoming sharper and more defined, as if drawn by an increasingly skilled hand. Tormund leaned forward, placing a weathered hand on his son's shoulder. "Whatever the gods' intentions, you are my son. I raised you with love and honor, taught you the ways of our people, shared with you the wisdom of my years. That bond is stronger than any divine purpose." Thorvald's expression softened, and he covered his father's hand with his own. "You have been more than I deserved, father. Your kindness gave life meaning when I had nothing. But lately, I've been having dreams." "What manner of dreams?" "I see things, father. Visions of places I've never been, conversations with beings I don't recognize. There's a voice that calls to me, offering knowledge and power beyond imagining. It tells me that my true purpose lies not in this quiet settlement, but in something greater, something that would require me to—" Thorvald stopped abruptly, as if catching himself before revealing too much. "Require you to what, my son?" "It doesn't matter," Thorvald said quickly, though his jaw tightened as he spoke. "They're only dreams. Probably nothing more than a young man's restless imagination." But Tormund had lived long enough to recognize the signs of inner turmoil. Something was changing in his adopted son, something that went beyond normal coming-of-age struggles. The old warrior's instincts, dormant for years but never truly dead, began to stir with unease. Over the following weeks, Thorvald's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, claiming to be hunting or training in the woods, but always returning empty-handed and oddly energized. His skills in combat continued to improve at an almost supernatural rate, as if some inner force was guiding his development. The other young warriors began to notice the changes as well. Where once they had admired Thorvald's abilities, now some spoke in hushed tones about how his eyes seemed to glow during sparring sessions, how his laughter sometimes carried an edge that made their skin crawl. "There's something unnatural about Tormund's boy," whispered Olaf Ironarm to his companions as they watched Thorvald effortlessly defeat 3 opponents simultaneously during training. "No man learns that quickly without assistance." Most dismissed such talk as jealousy, but Tormund found himself paying closer attention to his son's actions. He noticed how animals behaved strangely around Thorvald. Dogs would whimper and retreat, while ravens seemed drawn to him in unusual numbers. The sacred grove, where Tormund had found the infant years ago, became Thorvald's favorite retreat. And more than once, villagers reported seeing him there deep in conversation with shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. The truth came to Tormund in a dream that felt more real than waking life. He found himself standing in a great hall that seemed to exist between dimensions, its walls shifting between stone and mist, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Before him sat a figure he recognized immediately from countless tales and prayers. Odin himself, the All-Father, his single eye burning with ancient wisdom. Tormund Grimson. The god's voice echoed with the power of thunder and the whisper of wind. "You have raised the child well, old warrior." "My lord Odin." Tormund dropped to one knee, his heart pounding with awe and terror. "I have tried to honor you in all things." "Indeed you have. But the time has come for you to understand the true nature of what you found in my sacred grove." Odin's expression grew grave, and when he continued, his words carried the weight of prophecy. "The mark upon the boy's chest is not mine, faithful servant. Though it bears the shape of my sacred ravens, it was placed there by another, one whose cunning rivals even my own wisdom." Tormund's blood ran cold as understanding began to dawn. "My lord, if not your mark, then whose?" "Loki," Odin said simply, and the name seemed to echo through dimensions, carrying with it the weight of cosmic mischief and inevitable betrayal. "The trickster saw fit to place one of his chosen in your path, knowing that your good heart would ensure the child's survival and proper training. You have unknowingly raised not a servant of order, but an agent of chaos." "But surely," Tormund pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation, "surely the love between father and son can overcome any divine manipulation. Thorvald has grown up with honor, with loyalty." "Love is powerful, Tormund Grimson, more powerful than gods sometimes realize. But Loki's influence grows stronger as the boy reaches manhood. Soon he will face a choice that will define not only his destiny, but yours as well. The chaos in his blood will call to him, and he must choose whether to answer or resist." The dream began to fade, but Odin's final words burned themselves into Tormund's memory. "Prepare yourself, old warrior. The greatest battle of your life approaches, and this time your enemy will be one you love as your own heart." Tormund woke with tears on his weathered cheeks, and the terrible knowledge that everything he thought he understood about his life had been an illusion. The child he had rescued, raised, and loved as his own son was destined to become his destroyer, unless somehow the power of human love could overcome the will of the gods themselves. Outside his longhouse, the sound of ravens calling in the pre-dawn darkness seemed louder than ever before, and somewhere in the distance Thorvald's laughter echoed through the settlement with a quality that no longer sounded entirely human. The old Viking warrior reached for his battle-axe and held it close, not as a weapon, but as a comfort in the face of approaching darkness. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to confront his son with the truth or wait to see if love might yet triumph over destiny. But in his heart, Tormund Grimson knew that the peaceful chapter of his life was ending, and the most difficult test of his faith, love, and courage was about to begin. As dawn breaks over the northern fjords in our tale, we're left with a father's love standing against divine destiny, and a young man caught between the mortal bonds that raised him and the chaotic nature that flows in his veins. Will Thorvald choose the path of love and honor his father taught him, or will Loki's influence prove too powerful to resist? The ancient sagas remind us that even the gods themselves are not immune to the power of genuine human emotion and the bonds forged through years of care and sacrifice. In this clash between destiny and free will, between divine purpose and mortal love, we see reflected our own daily choices between the easier path and the righteous one. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the age of the Vikings. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others who appreciate tales of love, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow in the human soul. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the realm of Norse mythology, and let us know in the comments how you think this tale should continue. Until next time, may your own journey be guided by honor and courage. Skull.